In this video, I'm going to be going over why the scientific method should be considered a daughter of the Catholic Church. But before I do, I want to bring up the objection that you probably have in your mind, or most people have in their minds, which is, what about the Galileo Affair? You know, what happened there? Well, the Galileo Affair was a very convoluted thing, and he is given the designation of the father of the scientific method, but I think it's for the wrong reasons, and I'm going to tell you why. The first is, they'll say he's the father of the scientific method, but other people were using the scientific method at the time. His fellow scientists, bishops, the scientific panels run through the church, in which they were basically helping, what we would consider like journals today, like medicine journals, and they had that type of panel set up in the Catholic Church. And so they were using the scientific method to come to conclusions and validating the data and information. And it's because the scientific method was already established. And so it makes no sense that he would be considered the father of the scientific method when it's basically been around for about 400 years. And I'm sure you heard that on my computer, I'm sorry. But the fact that it has been around for 400 years is very telling of a kind of a perspective given to the church. And the reason why is because you have the Enlightenment. And anything after the Enlightenment started is considered good. Anything before it, depending on who you are, is bad. Now, Galileo, very much like Martin Luther, is treated as kind of like a central figure in rejecting the church in some way. Whereas you have Martin Luther, who was doing the 95 Theses during 1517, even though he was very much a part of the Catholic Church at that time, and he was just questioning what was going on. You have Galileo, who was very much a Catholic, questioning the church in terms of some of the scientific claims. And he kind of went a bit beyond that, but not getting too much into it. The point that I'm making is that he was against the church. And so he's used as a figure to show that, despite the Catholic Church, you have the scientific method by someone who went at odds with the church, like Galileo. And so he's kind of used as like a figurehead like that. And that's wrong because, like I said, the Catholic Church has had the scientific method. The university system had the scientific method for 400 years prior to that. You have people like Bishop Grosseteste, who was the Chancellor of Oxford. He eventually gave us the understanding of why rainbows... Sorry, I've got something in my... why rainbows are the way they are. Like, light travels through the water, and like a prism, it spreads the rainbow out. That was the bishop of the Catholic Church that did that. He was the one that did that in the 1200s. And then you have someone like Roger Bacon, who was a friar, who took the scientific method that Bishop Grosseteste was using and then refined it further. To the point, he really should be the person that we go to and say he's the father of the modern day scientific method. And this was during the early medieval times, late Dark Ages. But that's the beautiful thing about this is that it wasn't dark. It was actually very enlightening, but it wasn't enlightening in a atheist way, which is what the Enlightenment really promotes. It doesn't promote diversity of thought, it promotes anti-Catholicism. The next thing I want to talk about is the division between science and religion. People will say, well, science and religion talk about truth, and they're at odds with each other because of that. And it's like, no, that's not the case. One is talking about material truth, and that how something is done. The other is talking about why or a purpose of something. And usually we use that in tandem with each other in every other scenario. Like, I build a house because I, want my house to be lived in by me and my family. Or I buy food because I want to eat it to keep, there's a purpose that we typically give to things when we use them. And they're not all materially sound. Like, it's not simply a matter of the scientific method gives us value systems or morality or anything like that. Science gives us how something happens in regards to the natural world. When religion makes scientific claims, that's where the problem is. But the problem's also there when science makes claims that it can't, such as giving purpose to things. Science tells us how something happens. It does not tell us why. Religion tells us why. Science is a tool, and we got to keep that in mind, because it is something that we use that is the accumulation of knowledge from the scientific method to then better our lives, hopefully. So when someone says trust the science and treats science as God, or like science says, that's very similar to saying, well, you got to trust the hammer the construction worker uses. But if the construction worker is drunk, like you don't want that happening at all. And that's a metaphor for people abusing the data that's out there, or abusing certain aspects of the scientific method that usually tend to give bias. Whether it be the actual data analysis or the way things are analyzed. It's where you get like a lot of retracted studies, but also in the misunderstanding of what a study says and then applying it incorrectly. Again, religion can't make scientific claims, and science shouldn't make religious claims. That is the big caveat, because they are two different things, how and why. Catholicism in particular allowed for different types of understandings coming together, from Muslim, Jewish, pagan, other Catholics coming together like in a womb, all these components coming together and then being pushed out through the university system that the Catholic Church herself established. And so that is why the scientific method should be considered a daughter of the church, because you have people like Bishop Grosseteste, Roger Bacon, a friar, make it more perfect and perfected it, and used it to establish, what eventually got spread as the scientific method in the university system, which ultimately led to scientific panels and all these other things, which then gets into Galileo. And then, in between all of that, you have these people who are the heads of science. So like when I say heads of science, I mean like the forerunners, the pioneers into these scientific fields that were priests, bishops, monks, friars. Science and Catholicism was not at odds with each other. We're not at odds with each other. I don't know why I said it that way, but we're not at odds with each other. It wasn't until the Enlightenment where they basically made science a religion. Notre Dame was turned into a cathedral of logic for scientism. That wasn't like a joke. That was a huge desecration. But it kind of symbolized exactly what was happening. Science is not something you just simply use for the sake of science. There's a purpose. The idea of being progressive, for example. What are you progressing to? There has to be a purpose. Change for the sake of change is bad. If you have questions, or you want to rebut some of the things I said, if you want to do it in charity, do it in the comment section. I'd be happy to go back and forth with people. If you want to talk about, maybe quantitative versus qualitative and how those interact with purpose, absolutely, I'd be happy to do that too. I will be doing a video on what is the probability that God exists. As a statistician, specifically a frequentist, I'm not a Bayesian, even though I do understand Bayesian statistics. I think it's improper to assume so much usually, which is why I'm a frequentist. That, which itself is very, it's almost like a belief system. But that's a subset of how statistics is used within the scientific method. I'm going to be going into what is the probability God exists, because I've been watching a few debates and a lot of people bring up probability as if it's an argument against God. Or they try to use what's, probabilistic models. And I'm going to very much show why that's inappropriate. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.